Okay, everybody. I love the energy in the room and the fact that this energy has been maintained for the last 2 days. It's really remarkable, and we're gonna need that continuity and that energy moving forward out of this conference. So again, I'm Kate Meese. I'm Executive Director of the Local Government Commission, the forum organizers, in partnership with the state of California and many other partners. And I've got to say, I've just been blown away by, of course, the participation, but just the engagement. I've heard so many positive things. One person commented to me that in the sessions, which of course were standing room only and completely packed, and apologies for people who had to stand so much throughout the day, but I heard that the questions that all of you asked were really thought-provoking and insightful, and really any of you could have been up here on the stage and been presenters. So it gives me a lot of hope to see the level of knowledge in this room, you know, the things that you guys are all working on, the interdisciplinary nature, the different levels of leadership. That's really what makes me think that we can do this as a state, and you know, we are going to see progress over the next couple of years. So that's what keeps me working in this area. So we're going to conclude this conference with 2 keynote speakers who are going to provide a call for action. These are both people that are doing a lot of innovative work, that are showing that we can do this, that we don't have to choose between the environment and the economy, that we can make progress, and they're both doing tremendous things to transform communities and transform the state of California. So I will turn it over to our first speaker, and we've switched the order. Our first speaker, Wade Prova, is Deputy Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor to Governor Jerry Brown. He is part of the Governor's Energy and Environment team, working to advance distributed energy, CEQA processing analysis, land use, military and local government issues. Prior to joining the governor's administration, he served as West Coast Regional Director for the Environmental Defense Fund. He formerly worked as Environmental Advisor and Governmental Affairs Director for then San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom. So thanks, Wade, for joining us. He's a wealth of knowledge and brings a perspective from a number of different roles he's played.
All right, I've just gulped down a cup of coffee. Hopefully you have too, for our last plenary here together. First of all, congratulations to Kate and to KIF and to LGC and to Michael and to OPR. Let's give them a round of applause for an amazing couple days. I think many of us have remarked about the size of this event, considering it's the first event, 800 people. Not only is it a testament to LGC and OPR's organizational skills, but also a testament to the real demand for leaders on this topic to get together and to work together and learn from one another. So no doubt this is the first of many events like this. Secondly, thank you to all of you. We've all been there. This is day 2 of the conference, and this is the last session. So you all are the brave and committed, and you're getting a door prize on your way out for sticking around. So Michael, get on that. I'll be brief, and I want, in part because you all have listened to a lot of people, in part because the second speaker is quite a compelling mayor. I just spent about 60 minutes with him, and I'm pretty amazed by Mayor Parris of Lancaster. So I'll share some thoughts as the last state government speaker, and then get off the stage and cede my time to him. We all know we're in a crisis. You know the manifestations of the crisis where you live. I've spent most of my working hours over the last 6 months focused on drought, helping lead our governor's drought task force. We know, and I know, that there are dozens of communities throughout the state that are within 3 months of running out of drinking water as a result of drought. That means turning on the tap and no water coming out. There are rivers and streams that have literally dried up to the point that endangered and threatened species are being trucked from place to place by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. There is a 6 to 12 month waiting list to drill deeper wells in the Central Valley, where farmers and people rely on water. Not to mention that those wells cost tens of thousands of dollars to drill, and many people can't afford them. Wildfires are raging across the state. State government has spent $100 million more than it does in a normal year to staff up our CAL FIRE wildfire fighters earlier in the year as a result of the drought. Now, everybody in this room understands that if you go on TV and are interviewed, you can't directly relate or you can't directly tie any one extreme event to climate change. But we all know the truth, which is climate change, this gigantic planetary crisis, has real, meaningful, urgent impacts in California. So takeaway number one, and I heard it today, is the continued need to connect the dots for people. We all in this room are probably the converted on the importance of building resilience and preparing for the impacts of climate change. But the average person on the street doesn't have time and really oftentimes hasn't heard exactly how climate change is related to the impacts that they may face and the threats they may face. So one key takeaway for me is as we get into the weeds on all of this different policy and science, we need to continue to explain the crisis at hand in simple and clear ways. And it may be a slightly different approach or explanation in Kern County or Butte County as it is in San Francisco or Berkeley, but we all need to connect the dots and meet people where they're at to explain why preparing and becoming more resilient against climate change's impacts makes a difference. Secondly is, amidst this crisis, tremendous opportunity exists. I think we are living and doing this work at a very special point in time. Think about this. At the local level, represented by the people in this room, tremendous things are happening. We went from talking about climate change last decade, thinking about the impacts, to actually doing things, to putting measures in place, to building in different ways, to actually changing policies, infrastructure projects locally. This stuff is actually happening at the local level. At the state level, hopefully you've understood from hearing from John Laird and Mary Nichols and Ken Alex, we at the state believe that we get it, and we get the urgency of it, and we're committed to figuring out how the state government supports local governments that are really doing the bulk of this work. We haven't figured it out, but we're committed to getting there. And if Governor Brown is given another 4 years, you can, I'll sit here and guarantee, this is my 3 p.m. guarantee, that state government will be committed to trying to figure out how we can empower you over the next 4 years to get done in your communities what needs to get done. And then lastly, the federal government. Former Judge Alice Hill was here on the Obama administration. Some of us got to staff the President's Task Force on Climate Preparedness and Resilience. Let me tell you, the Obama administration gets it on this issue, and they are specifically focused on how they can move the needle in the next 2 years. And so this task force put together a long laundry list of recommendations. Some are, frankly, pie-in-the-sky ideas. Other are very actionable recommendations that the Obama administration is going to take. So think about this. We have a president who cares about this, is putting money on the table, and has prioritized this. We have a governor on the same page who's been a lifetime champion on this issue. And at the local level, we have, in the words of George H.W. Bush, 1,000 points of light across the state of things actually getting done. So where from here? I'll tell you my perspective from state government, and I think my colleagues share some of these observations. One is we recognize that this is an inherently local challenge. We spend a lot of time on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which can be achieved ultimately internationally, hopefully, certainly on the national and state level. We're very proud of implementing AB 32. Making communities resilient is fundamentally local. Sea level rise does not mean anything in Fresno County, or it doesn't threaten Fresno County, whereas summer heat doesn't mean a whole lot in a coastal county. Different challenges in different places. So we at state government, and certainly not the folks in DC, we're not coming up with the answers, and we won't actually achieve success or failure. It's frankly you who represent local government who are most important. So one, we need good models of cost-effective, meaningful actions that can be taken. The work that you're doing is tremendously important because you're among the first local communities to do this in the United States and possibly the world. So recognize as sometimes slow and arduous as actually making progress and getting a project done, we need you to be successful to create these models that then we export elsewhere. I was talking to somebody from who was staffing the federal task force, and they said, look, if you guys don't figure it out in California, it's going to take a lot longer for folks in other states to figure it out. And we in California continue to be environmental leaders, and you all are on the front lines of developing these models. Secondly is you all are learning from one another. We don't have the luxury of time as it relates to climate change or addressing impacts. We need to learn from each other. We need to avoid communities reinventing the wheel. And that's why forums like this are so important, so that we can do projects quicker and better. Third, we still need to figure out how the levels of government interact with one another. What is the role for the federal government on this topic? Is it policy? Is it ensuring, state hazard mitigation plans incorporate climate change? Is it conditioning federal transportation dollars on resilient projects? We know it's money and resources, but what else is it? What at the state level should we be doing? It's not about necessarily, only about passing bills in the legislature. That ultimately isn't going to make your communities more resilient. It might be part of the answer, but really, how can state governments support you? That's what we need to continue to focus on. So it's obviously a localized challenge, major point number one, but we also need to mainstream this, and I think it's being mainstreamed. I'm really gratified that not only seeing some of the usual suspects that have been at this for the last decade, but we're seeing elected officials from places in California that I didn't know were focused on this. We're seeing port commissioners. We're seeing transportation staff. This is really becoming mainstream. From my perspective, we won't be successful if we put this in a box, that you have, all of these functions of government, and then you have a lot of staff, you have staff over here focused on making our communities more resilient. That's not going to ultimately work. We need to integrate the questions on resilience and preparedness into each element of both local and state government. So, and in that, it's not necessarily, I acknowledge that funding is necessary, but it's not necessarily different infrastructure. It's making infrastructure smarter, greener, more resilient. We in the state spend billions of dollars each year on infrastructure. Just Caltrans transportation budget alone. If you're from Caltrans, raise your hand. All right, well, you have a lot of money, Steve. And so, it's not a question of we don't have money to do resilience or preparedness. We have a whole lot of money. The question is do we build the future of our state in a resilient way or not? So to us, it's tell us how we should be doing this at the state level, but then also make sure that your general plans, your facilities, your water infrastructure, et cetera, have those climate smart criteria on the local level. We can't compartmentalize resilience. We need to mainstream it. So it really, ultimately when we do the California Adaptation Forum in 2016 or 2018, we attract a far broader universe of local elected officials and NGOs, et cetera, than we already have here. I think, and I'm really quite excited that California continues to be at really the point of the spear on this topic. I think we can feel very good about what California is doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think we can feel pretty good about what California is doing to prepare for climate change and create resilient communities. If we can't do it in California, at least in the United States, where else can it be done? It's ultimately you all, more than us in the state, that will define whether we'll be successful, not only in California, but across the country, and I would argue world. So the work that you're doing on a local level, far from protecting and making safe your own community, will actually and continues to lead a movement to make communities safe across the world. So I'm excited. Hopefully you're excited. Let's continue to coordinate this conversation. You know that this is only one conversation in a whole set of conversations that all of you have on a regular basis. I know we in the governor's office are very excited and committed to continuing this, frankly, so we can learn more about how we can be helpful. And I know the Local Government Commission, before we reconvene in 2 years with the next California Adaptation Forum, will be holding a lot more conversations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wade. We really appreciate your leadership on this issue. So I want to turn it over to Mayor Paris at this point. He's been the mayor of Lancaster, the city of Lancaster, since 2008. Throughout his tenure, Paris has developed and implemented his vision of making Lancaster one of the first net zero cities in the world. He will highlight his achievements, including opening the nation's only operating solar thermal power plant, creating affordable solar energy housing, and starting an affordable solar financing program that includes more than 30 businesses, schools, church, and municipal sites.
Good afternoon. You know, when we talk about how many people are here, that it is truly remarkable. It's the biggest crowd I've ever spoke to on this issue. But it'll double next year, and it will double the year after that. Because the wave has finally started to roll in, and people of intelligence are recognizing we need to do something. And so, welcome to the war, because that's exactly what it is. But before we talk about the war, I want to introduce you to Ethan, Elizabeth, and Abigail. They are my grandchildren. They are, when they're in the room, life is good. And they will probably have, or could have, a remarkable life. Imagine a world where power is affordable to everyone. You know, think about the rest of the world a little bit. You know, one of the reasons China is building so many coal power plants is because there's millions and millions and millions of people whose only power comes from the fire. And for the first time in history, everywhere on this planet, we can have affordable power to everyone. Imagine the creative potential that's going to open up. Imagine the wars we will not have, because there won't be any need for them. Just imagine what we could do, because technologically, we are there. One of the things I do when I'm not being a mayor is I'm a lawyer. I'm a personal injury lawyer and a class action lawyer. But we're closing down the personal injury side of it. Why? Because there's not going to be traffic accidents. The Google car is 90% safer. Oh, really? I'm not kidding. You know, it's a major. I think I got 20 lawyers working on personal injury that we're rolling back, because that's the world Ethan and Elizabeth and Abigail have the ability and the potential to inherit. Just that one little change. No traffic accidents. I mean, it's remarkable. But of course, there's a wrinkle. There's a wrinkle. The problem with climate change, or global warming, or whatever you want to call it, is we can't see it. You know, if a meteor was coming at us, an asteroid was coming at us, and it was so far out there that only the Hubble telescope could see it, and only a few people actually saw it, the world would come together, and we would start building whatever rockets we needed to build. We would do whatever we needed to do to divert the course of that asteroid. But there's something about the power of seeing it that we don't have with climate change. And it may be the death of us. Not too long ago, I went to the doctor, and he did embarrassing things to me. And he took some tissue, and I then went off to Boston and was doing a deposition, and I get a call. And the call was that somebody, he didn't know who it was, somebody in a lab somewhere saw something. And I heard the C word, and I heard it applied to me. The doctor didn't see it. You know, I don't know who saw it. I just know somebody saw it. And so I start the journey of finding out, do I want to burn it out? Do I want to poison it? Do I want to cut it out? Do I want to do all three? How much of me is going to be left when it's over? All because somebody I don't know saw it. And so I did it. And you're stuck with me. I did it early enough. So, but it's because somebody saw it. Nobody can see this. And so we are in grave danger. Grave danger. This isn't tomorrow. This isn't 100 years from now. The sixth mass extinction is happening now. We are so fragile at this moment. And we know it. You know, we all know it. How could we not know this? And yet, who do we allow? I got to read it. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Environmental Public Works. That's a pretty heavy position for what we're talking about here, right? Could you play the video?
Would it not be prudent to control the level of CO2 in some way in the United States?
Well, if they can show scientifically that there is a problem with it, then I'd say there is, to go ahead and do it. But science is now showing that there's not a relationship between man-made gases or CO2 and climate change. For that reason, the only justification for using it is if they can make things more economical. And just the reverse is true. So I would probably say no. Let's keep in mind, these countries who signed on to the Kyoto Treaty early on, like Canada, they're now re-examining their positions, and the 60 scientists in Canada are now petitioning Prime Minister Harper to re-look at perhaps getting out, since the science is showing that the relationship between CO2 and climate change doesn't seem to exist.
This isn't just anybody. This isn't just anybody. And look what he said, 60 scientists in Canada. You know, Canada has a few more scientists than 60, right? But it sounded so compelling, didn't it? And I would hope Canada's re-examining decisions. I would hope we re-examine decisions constantly. It doesn't mean you're changing the decision, right? They know how to use the language. They know how to look compelling. And we make the mistake of thinking we are going to convince him of a scientific fact. We are not. We are not. His self-interest is so wrapped up around it that we do not have the time to waste on him. We have to start recognizing this is a war, not a street fight. You know the difference? A war is choreographed. A war is planned. We find the battlefields we can win. We find the weak spots. And we start acting like we know what we know. And that is our entire way of life is going to change if we do nothing. It may cease. Oh, wait a minute. It's going to change if we do everything right. It may cease if we do nothing. The projections of what's coming at us. We know we're going to be 3 degrees warmer. There's no stopping that. Probably 4. If we hit 6, the world was 6 degrees warmer once. We know exactly what's going to happen. There were alligators in northern Canada. The world will not survive. And it's an interesting process that's going on. I'm a Republican. How many Republicans we got here? It's California, what can I say? But that is important to remember. I am a Republican mayor in the most Republican city in the state of California. You could not be more conservative than Lancaster. And we will be the first net zero city in the world. So none of you can say the resistance is too great. However hard they're pushing against you, you have to push back a little harder. Because it is our children who we are gambling. But look at these numbers. These are educated, college-educated Republican. Wait a minute, let me make sure I got this right. That's right. From 2006 to 2013, these are college grads. And the question is it human activity, or is it just a cycle? You know, a natural cycle of things. And look at the numbers. Non-college grads, 2357. College grads, 28%. I mean, it's such a known fact. 86% Democrats. Now let me ask you something. You really think you're that smarter than me? Because I would venture to guess that in this room, there's maybe 10 people that could tell you with clear specificity why CO2 in the atmosphere causes the planet to warm. Now, how many people here think heat comes from the sun? You know I'm trapping you, but how many really think it, right? It doesn't. It comes from the interaction of radiant energy and the molecules it comes in contact with. That's what produces the heat. CO2 produces a lot of heat, and then it reflects it back. Unfortunately, natural gas is 30 times, 10 times, you know, I hear numbers different all the time, produces more heat. And we are releasing that into the atmosphere at a rate never before dreamed of because of all the gas drilling we're doing now. I mean, we're just releasing it. We don't know what to do with it. There's so much of it. We're burning it off. There's so much of it. So every stride that we are making is being turned back because of our response to the energy crisis. There is no alternative to solar and wind and renewables. There is no alternative, at least that we know of. Nuclear is a possibility, but we all know the problems with that. So it strikes me as really odd that something we all know, something that is so devastatingly eminent, that we continue to do the same thing, as if we were blind. I think this is going to play. When people tell you it's a cycle and that there's no climate change, I mean, it was cold last year. Is this going to play? Do it again. Let me see if I can get it to work. Oh, look at that. You see how compelling they can make the argument? if you look at a short period of time, you can actually make the argument that this is nonsense. But if you look at it over the long period of time, it is irrefutable. All of us in this room really have to understand the actual science in a simplified way that we can explain it, and we better learn it pretty quick. Because right now what we're doing is we belong to tribes. Your tribe believes it's caused by man. My tribe believes it's just a cycle. Now, I gotta admit, that's kind of embarrassing for me. Well, it is. I mean, think about it. If it's a cycle, then we know the cause. You can't say a cycle's a cause. The reason we would know the cause is because we have historic data to look at. My grandchildren, they were conceived and they were born and they will live and they will die. And that's the cycle. But the cause was something my son-in-law did, and my daughter. That's the cause. Not one of these deniers can tell you what started the chain. And we know why. It has to do with Saturn and Jupiter and Venus, and their impact on the Earth's tilt and the change in the orbit. I mean, any astronomy student, smarter than me, could explain it with great detail, what causes climate change. We should be really cold right now, and we obviously are not. In my city, last summer, and I'm sure I will do it this summer, we had to rush to Walmart and buy water bottles to distribute to the homeless. It was 115 degrees. And if we didn't, I knew what was going to happen. We're having a lot of those days now. I grew up in Lancaster. I was born on Lancaster Boulevard. I never remember anything more than 107. That's a huge jump. We're getting ready, we're recognizing we're going to see 120. That's Saudi Arabia, 120. The Oakland being underwater already, really. If they closed the pumps, they would be. There isn't any doubt that if we do everything right, we're going to lose that whole area. We will probably see the San Francisco Bay at some point in Modesto. Certainly my children will. Certainly my children. That's how dire this thing is, and that's why these morons talking about cycles are an enemy more dangerous than anyone coming out of the Taliban. And I suggest we start treating them that way. Meaning we cannot let this senator talk to a room full of people that we are in and spread this nonsense and not get up and walk out. We have to recognize what we're doing here. We are talking about saving our planet, and we have to start acting like it. We cannot tolerate anyone that's going to slow us down. I understand a theme of the conference has been, what are we going to tell our children if we don't? Is that, anybody hear that here? I don't think you're going to need to tell them anything. I don't think they'll be there if we don't do something now. And there's reasons for it. The countries most at risk, Bangladesh in our lifetime. I'm 62. Heart disease, high blood pressure, but I fully expect to see Bangladesh disappear. It's built on an alluvial plain. A cyclone's going to come through. We know that's going to happen. There's 156 million people in Bangladesh. The Holocaust did not happen because people couldn't get out. It happened because people could not get in. meaning the borders closed. Immigration wasn't allowed. They couldn't get in. Guess where the longest fence the world has ever seen it exists? Anybody know? It's between India and Bangladesh. They know what's coming. They know what's going to happen. Pakistan is not in that much better of a place. The delta, the Nile, what do you call that, where the Nile empties into the Mediterranean? What? No, the delta, the Nile Delta, yeah. That feeds a lot of the Middle East. They don't know how that survives, the rise in oceans. They don't know how it survives. Unfortunately, a lot of these countries have nuclear weapons. Do you see the urgency of this? Do you see why what you're doing is so important? And at the same time, you know, I'm 62. I didn't expect to be around much longer when that doctor called. And there's an exhilaration to all this. I have a cause. I have some absolute meaning to my life. And so do you. It's a tremendous opportunity to do something with our lives that will have an impact that will last thousands of years. And all we have to do is have the courage to do it. Because I don't think there's any obstacles. Now, a lot has to do with where Lancaster is. We won the lotto. We did. We can produce more kilowatts from the sun than anyone from anywhere here. And probably the world. And we have transmission lines. That is really rare. The reason we have transmission lines is to Hatchby as the wind farms, right? So they were there waiting for us. After I got elected, I had to do a few things with the gang problem, and you know, we had a really high murder rate. Had to do something about that. We brought it down to 0, by the way. Thank you. And it was a little draconian in how we had to do it. Well, you know, I don't know how many people here are in government, but I think a lot. Our fundamental, absolute mandate is to protect the hardworking families of our community. Above all else, nothing else matters. And I was having 13 and 14-year-old kids being shot down in the middle of the streets. That's what I was elected into. It was draconian. But our city streets are now safe. And I think that's one of the reasons I was able to do this. Because it is a public safety issue. It is not an economic issue. It is not a social issue. It's not even a tribal issue of Republicans and Democrats. It is, are we protecting the hardworking families of our communities? And if we're not doing anything about climate change, we are not. Oh, let me go back. I get to brag. I'm sorry. First thing we did is we converted all the city buildings to solar. 97% of all the city power for buildings that are owned by the city comes from the sun. You know, we do an exchange with the grid, pull it out during the day, you know. We now have 32,000 solar panels at our schools. The schools' energy bills have dropped tremendously. We make money on it because we figured out the business model and the funding for it. We have 2,000 homes with permits for solar. Next year, every kilowatt used in Lancaster will be replaced by the sun. And one of the things we did was mandatory solar panels, every house. How many are on city councils and city government that are able to do that? come on. How many have? That's an easy fix. 1 kilowatt, you want to build a new house, you have to do it. We've already created over 1,000 local jobs. This has not been an economy killer at all. It's been our salvation. If you could play that, please.
This small city is California's biggest energy boom town, Lancaster, in California's Mojave Desert. It averages about 300 days per year of the most intense sunlight in the country.
We intend to figure out a way to use it the most efficiently anywhere in the world.
3 years ago, Mayor R.Rex Paris set a net zero power goal to harness the energy from the sun and become 100% power independent. Today, the city is halfway there and produces the most solar power per resident in the state.
We would be the deepest well if you were to imagine that was oil. And what's oil but power? And what is solar but power?
How hard has it been to get people on board with solar energy?
And the city has just embraced it.
Solar panels are just about everywhere, on downtown rooftops, at schools. Even the baseball stadium can power itself almost entirely by the sun.
They produce about 97% of the energy that's used in those facilities.
Jason Cottle is the deputy city manager and oversaw the installation of more than 6,000 panels in city buildings. The city leases them from a private company.
We pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay.
We were getting charged from the utility companies about 18 cents a kilowatt hour. So we save the difference.
It's made a big difference to the city's budget, saving more than $250,000 each year in energy costs. The mayor plans to save even more.
We will be net zero within the next 3 years, and the goal is eventually this city becomes independent of the grid.
And next year, this city takes another step closer toward its net zero goal, with a new law requiring solar panel installation in every single new home. Brandon Scott, CBS News, Lancaster, California.
I got to speed up. Once you start down this path, amazing things happen. We were trying to get BYD, it's one of the largest companies in China, to come produce electric vehicles in Lancaster. It was a 5-year process. But one of the first things I did was I got them to meet with KB Homes, America's largest home builder. Asked them to produce a home that was affordable. Now anybody can do this if you want to spend $1 million, but affordable, right? That was net zero. And they assured me it could not be done. I'm wasting their time, blah, 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 blah. And I'm putting together a company where everybody speaks Mandarin with, they speak English and, all reasons not to. I said, okay, well, what's it going to take to just get you to try to do this? It was interesting what they said. They said, how long would it take to permit it? Their biggest concern was how long a government obstacle, it's an obstacle created by government, how long to do the permit. And so I looked at my watch and I said, how long do you want it to take? Right? That got them interested. 4 months later, and seriously, in Lancaster, you want to put solar on your house, it's over the counter. It'll soon be over the internet. We shouldn't have any obstacles if it's alternative energy. But anyway, 4 months later, we flipped the switch. Net zero. No electricity is pulled off the grid. They have to be connected to the grid because Wade hasn't passed a law letting them go off the grid yet. If Wade was president, our kids would be fine. But 4 months later, flip the switch. A commercially viable home that was net zero. Now, you know what they did? Because now that starts that whole innovation, that whole thing starts happening in people's brains. 2.0 was built. Look what that can do. That's your utility bill. Your entire utility bill on this house. That's phenomenal. And it uses 30% of the water that a regular house does. And you don't have to put cactuses out front because the gray water system waters the lawn. You get to keep your lawn. How can anybody say this isn't a good idea? BYD finally made the decision, came to Lancaster. We are now producing 100% electric buses. They will sweep the world because they're cheaper. Now, they cost $1 million, and a diesel bus costs about $600,000. So how are they cheaper? It's the fuel cost. But when dealing with government, you got to change the model. It's the business model you got to change. Same thing with on the housing. You got to change the business model for it to make sense. You got to take, what we did is we're now selling the bus, but we're leasing the batteries. And you pay that out of the fuel budget. It's a lot cheaper. But if you don't change business models, the resistance is just too high to get over. The houses, that is a new business model. Most new houses are bought by investors who rent them out. If you're renting a house, you pay for the electricity, you pay for the water, you pay for the gas, you pay for the light bulbs. It's a new business model. You know, the developer has to pay for those things now, and those of you with regulatory power have to make them do it. You know, it's the only way. But KB discovered other things too. If you have part of the process with your subcontractors that there's going to be an energy efficiency evaluation of the house, and the people know that who are building it, 30% more efficient than if the same people build the same house without that requirement. What are we doing? Pass a regulation that every house, every new business has to be tested for energy efficiency. And we reduce the carbon footprint just by that one thing alone, 30%. All of these problems are manageable, are fixed, can be fixed. We just have to have the courage to do it. And then other things start happening. We totally redid our downtown. You got to come see it. That place was totally desolate. In 3 years, we totally rebuilt it. We'll have events with 30, 40,000 people, and we are the most integrated city in the country. Our neighborhoods are integrated. It's, you know, it really is the rainbow city, whatever you want to call it. But what's amazing about this, not one police incident after 4 events with 30 to 40,000 people. You develop a sense of community when you start doing this. And you're not allowed to screw up when you're having a community event. You're just not allowed to.
True.
This is the best part. We started a community aggregate. You know, what do you call those, Mark? Yeah, a community choice aggregate. It's better because we totally screwed up. When we signed those leases on those solar panels, you know, we dropped it way down. Guess what we're going to buy power for now? 4 cents a kilowatt. 4 cents. In China, it costs 3 cents from coal. That's how the prices are dropping. That's how economically viable this has become. And we're going to sell that power. We're going to make money. Our taxes are going to go down. And more importantly, when I start competing with your cities to get some type of manufacturer in, I can give them cheap power. You can't. It makes nothing. It's just an intelligent thing for governments to do. But it's a new business model. You know, I did not get a Christmas card from Edison for the last 2 years. I don't understand it. But you got to have the courage to deal with the utilities. You know, they want to do it, but some of them don't want to do it. It's a whole change of their way of life, and you got to recognize that this is hard for them. But we don't have the option of being nice. And when I told them I wanted LED street lights, and they told me they couldn't do it, I said I bet I could red tag the old ones. You know what a red tag is? So now, rather than having to do that, we're going to buy the street lights. We're going to operate them at half the cost, and we're going to make money. Because guess what? I didn't know this. This is so cool. when the power demand does not meet what's being produced, they got a choice. They can spin down the power plant and then have to spin it back up. It's real expensive. Or they can pay you to use the power. If I own my streetlights, I just turn them on. And they pay me for that. It is nothing but profit from all this. For half the cost of maintaining them, we're going to put LED streetlights up. I'm going to put Wi-Fi on top of the poles. We're going to be able to put Wi-Fi in poor neighborhoods. Think about what these kids go through. I didn't know you paid for Wi-Fi. My wife told me. I was shocked. But think about it. My kids, when they were younger, they had the wealth of knowledge of the entire history of the world at their keyboard. The kids that were not that affluent did not. And so we're asking these kids to go to school every day and run a race, but we don't let them wear shoes. Pretty soon, you quit running. I think if there's one major problem in America today, we have to put Wi-Fi in every home, because it's not fair if we don't. You know, Obama's not going to solve this problem. The governor's not going to solve this problem. You know why? They don't issue building permits. I do. And you do. Right? This is a local problem, and you have to have the courage to demand your local officials start addressing it. They can no longer say, look to Washington or look to the state, because they cannot fix this. We can fix it. But remember this. I've spoke 5-10 minutes over. But in that time, it got 5 to 10 minutes closer. And we are out of time. Make no mistake about that. We will not have the option to fix this in 10 years. We either start now, or we're not going to have to tell them anything. Thank you.
You're the man.
Wow. I mean, just blown away by that. And I think if the mayor of the most Republican city in California can do it, we have no excuses. You all can do it as well. So thank you for that. I want to end this fabulous conference with some gratitude. I think that's a good way to end any event. First, I want to thank so much the hotel and the staff that have kept everything running smoothly throughout this event. I want to again thank our many sponsors and our partners. And I wanted to, if you could stand up, if you were a sponsor, if you were on the steering committee, if you were on the executive committee, if you were on the review committee, please stand up. I don't know how many of you got this far in the book, but you can see that there are 2 full pages with small writing in some areas of names and sponsors. So this was a huge effort, and we really have to thank all the many players that were involved in this. I have to give a special thanks to some of the partners that we worked most closely with. Of course, the state of California, and in particular, the California Natural Resources Agency. And unfortunately, JR isn't here with us. I was going to embarrass him a little bit. And the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And then, of course, my staff. And I want to call up Michael and Kif, if you could stand up and be recognized. And by come up on stage kind of a thing. Yeah, I mean, these guys put a tremendous amount of work into this effort, and just a small token of appreciation I have is it's a book of Sacramento parks and trees, and because neither of them are from Sacramento, and unfortunately we're losing Michael for a year to CEQ, so we want to remind him about Sacramento and that he needs to come back. So thank you. And we're trying to pull Kif into Sacramento as well. He's been telecommuting to work with us at the local government commission, but he's an honorary Sacramentan at this point. There are a number of other staff folks that have helped both through the Resources Agency, OPR, and the local government commission. Many of the Jenny Woods, I want to recognize you for your tremendous work. It's been really appreciated. And all the staff that aren't here because they've been making everything happen behind the scenes. Many of them are at the registration desk, so please thank them on your way out. And again, I just have to thank all of you for your leadership on this issue. This is what gives me hope. This is why I feel like we can do this as a state of California. And while this, to me, is this is success, having 800 people. Wow, we're, greatly exceeded my most ambitious goal. We exceeded the National Adaptation Forum. We're really doing something special here in California, but success is what happens tomorrow. Success is what happens at the next National Adaptation Forum. What story can we tell next year when we go out to the National Adaptation Forum? What can I tell them is happening in California? What can I tell them is happening at the local level, at the regional level, at the state level? What are we going to be able to point to in 2016 when we come back? Hopefully it'll be an even more diverse group, and hopefully we'll have some measurable successes. And I think we will, and I think we will because of all your leadership. So thank you for being here. It's been a great 2 days.
It's always difficult for the person who is giving the farewell to say thank you to herself. So, a huge round of applause for Kate.
Thank you. This is all about action, and if you haven't written your comments up in the poster, if you haven't tweeted, if you haven't come and found me or Kif or Michael, please do. We're going to be meeting tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about what we can do starting tomorrow to take all the good ideas, take all the energy here, and move it forward. So please engage. Thank you very much.